Herman Cain's sunny campaign took a stormy turn this week. The candidate sent mixed messages for days as he confronted sexual harassment allegations from his past. And so will the scandal bring his soaring campaign back down to earth? Let us bring back the roundtable. George, first to you. Can Herman Cain survive it and fix it?
He can fix it, and he still won't survive. That is, I don't think his is a viable presidential campaign. He's just not...
Regardless of this.
He's not conducting it as a presidential campaign. He's not going where the early voters are going to vote. Things like little indices like that. He's not raising money. This looks like something other than what it purports to be.
But I think what's interesting about that is I agree he's not conducting this like a normal campaign. But the interesting thing is he either leads the polls or is tied in the polls, not doing all the traditional things in this campaign. I think there are a bunch of voters out there that want a non-traditional candidate, which is why Herman Cain's risen in the polls, even though he doesn't have experience. He's made a bunch of mistakes in these latest allegations. If he gets through them, and you never know what more shoes are going to drop, he mishandled this terribly, mishandled this whole thing terribly. But to me, this whole thing with Herman Cain is a signal about how tribal our politics has become. Because immediately when this allegations comes out, the right sort of castigates Politico and who broke the story, and castigates the media and castigates them, saying, okay, this is horrible. And then the left says he's disqualified, he can't run, and nobody can actually have a measured conversation about the people involved and what's the issue and all that, because we line up in tribes and we throw rocks at each other without any conversation.
But I think this is more a problem with our media culture. I mean, Herman Cain is the latest balloon boy. You know, everybody's obsessed with it. It's wall-to-wall cable coverage, but even the three networks, it's like 50 stories on Herman Cain in the first 3 days. And if you really ask commentators off the air whether they really think that it's probable that Herman Cain, even before these allegations, will be president and sing Imagine There's No Pizza in the White House, they would tell you no. So why are we obsessing about it?
We're obsessing because he could become the candidate. I don't think he has a chance of becoming president. But the interesting thing here is that the Republican field is in such a mess that anything's possible. And it's perfectly plausible, given the mood in the party amongst the activists, that they won't anoint Mitt Romney and that they will actually go for Cain.
Before we get to Mitt Romney, I want to ask you about not just the allegations but the substantive issues. Let's just play what Herman Cain said on PBS just a few days ago about China.
So yes, they're a military threat. They've indicated that they're trying to develop nuclear capability and they want to develop more aircraft carriers like we have. So yes, we have to consider them a military threat.
Yeah. Well, you know, we do know that China's had a nuclear capability since the 60s. So is this, again, something that's problematic? Is it a misspeak, as he said? I mean, how does a presidential candidate say that kind of thing and
I
survive?
thought this Oriental embarrassment was worse for him, actually, than the sexual harassment, because not knowing that China was already a nuclear power seems like a bit of a game changer for somebody's credibility as a potential president. So when I saw that, I must say I wrote him off, because if you don't know that, what else don't you know? I mean, this is Sarah Palin territory. She used to say stuff like that, and everybody said, forget her. And I think that's actually the really serious thing that's happened to him, is that he's lost his credibility.
Cain is a leading indicator for this month of a multi-month phenomenon, which is resistance in Mitt Romney. Now, what Mitt Romney's people say, and I've talked to someone who really knows, is with him in New Hampshire and worries about that state and knows it. He says the cure to a lack of enthusiasm is winning. Once you start winning,
but they think he'll win in New Hampshire.
They think he'll win in New Hampshire, and they're weighing the possibility of rolling the dice and trying to win in Iowa. If you win in Iowa and New Hampshire, it's over. So they think that the enthusiasm can be cured by success.
Well, let's play just something that Mitt Romney said, because obviously a lot of the discomfort with him is what people consider flip-flopping. So let's have a quick look at what he just said about this issue.
I cannot state every single issue in exactly the same words every single time. And so there are some folks who obviously for various political and campaign purposes will try and find some change and draw great attention to something which looks like a change, which in fact is entirely consistent.
The problem's the problem's not saying this mild nuances in his difference. In 1996, he denounced the flat tax as a tax cut for fat cats. This year he says, I love a flat tax. That's not a nuance.
Well, and the fundamental problem that he has, and watch why he sits at this 25% lid, and watch why the Tea Party voters and the Republican Party won't vote for him, which why conservatives don't want to vote for him, is they think that he's got a secret. And his secret is going to be he's going to win the nomination, and as soon as he wins the nomination, he's going to go back to what he was in Massachusetts, and he's going to set himself up as a moderate to run against Barack Obama as a moderate businessman. That's what they think, and they're valid to fear. Much of the voters in the Republican Party are valid to fear that.
Because that's what he's got to do to win. And I actually think the base case scenario is that is exactly what's going to happen. He'll get the nomination, and there'll be lots of grumbling on the right, and then he will be the credible contender who actually beats Obama. I think right now you'd be very unwise to bet against Mitt Romney becoming president.
Which is
But
to
also
say,
remember, there is a dark horse. And that's John Huntsman, who does know that China has nuclear capabilities.
He's been there.
I give Herman Cain a better shot than John Huntsman.
Okay, but the latest predictors say that John Huntsman would be, I mean, if you look at the New York Times, that mathematical algorithm they came out with, they say that actually Huntsman would be the most serious challenger. But he doesn't have a hope, it seems, because he's never...
Because the voters get to make that decision, and the voters do not like John Huntsman in the Republican Party.
At the moment, as all the front runners are imploding one after the other, and as Mitt Romney is so radioactive, to continue the nuclear metaphor, John Huntsman may be the last man standing.
The next guy to rise is Newt Gingrich. If Herman Cain's in the course of this week and he doesn't handle it well and there's more stories out, he falls, the numbers aren't going to go, the voters aren't going to go to Mitt Romney yet. They're going to go to somebody else. And the natural one, I think, right now to go to is Newt Gingrich.
But is it still playing? Is it still just going and then are these the shifting or permanent
I think it's going to be fluid
numbers?
until the Iowa caucuses, and I think anything can happen up until the Iowa caucus. I think it's fluid because, as George pointed out, there's this huge vote out. There's this huge vote out there that's moving around. That's 70-75% that keeps wanting somebody other than Mitt Romney. Until they're forced to actually make the decision, they're going to keep moving.
How many of you watched the Rick Perry video?
I've watched it. Quite enjoyed it, actually.
Yeah.
What do you think it says?
I like that side of him, the sort of swaggering Texan. I can't get enough of that. The problem is all the Texans I know can't stand him. And that seems like a pretty bad sign to me, because if he really was that guy that we saw swaggering, they would love him. But there's clearly a problem.
The charitable explanation is that he was drunk.
Well, that's always a good sign. That's always a good sign of a
politician.
politician. Think of Churchill.
His campaign should come out and admit it.
I've seen Rick Perry before in Texas and have watched him for 25 years. I have seen that side of him, and it's not necessarily related, people say, to painkillers or whatever. He sometimes does that. That's some sort of what he does. He sort of loosens up and has that shtick. I actually think in some ways it could help him, because part of the thing he's been too stiff and he hasn't performed well. Until you get a little bit goofy, and there's parts in that were a little bit goofy.
He went too far.
But George, he has sort of stiffened up his campaign process. He's retooled. He's got more people.
First of all, you know the wrong Texans, because the majority of Texans
keep
re-electing him. Well, you know a minority. Second,
you know a majority.
Second, the people in the room in New Hampshire seem to like it. Third, now about Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney may be our Henry of Navarre. Navarre famously converted to Catholicism to keep the throne, saying memorably, as all politicians eventually do, Paris is well worth a mass, and it may work for Mitt Romney.